What if everything you thought you knew about the Vikings was wrong? The horned helmets, the mindless savages, the bloodthirsty berserkers who only burned and killed. Hollywood gave us a legend. History tells a different story, and it's far more extraordinary. The real Vikings were explorers, merchants, lawmakers, poets, and yes, sometimes fearsome warriors. They reached North America 5 centuries before Columbus. They founded cities that still exist today. They shaped the DNA of half of Europe. They wrote its languages. They built its earliest parliaments. This is the real story of the Vikings. Beyond the myths, beyond the movies, into the truth. And the truth, as always, is stranger and more human than any legend.
The word Viking doesn't mean Scandinavian. It comes from the Old Norse Viking, meaning a pirate raid or the act of going on one. Not every Norseman was a Viking. Most were farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, people who lived and died without ever leaving their fjords. The Viking Age began around 793 AD with the raid on Lindisfarne Monastery, a shock that sent tremors through the entire Christian world. But why then? Climate shifts, population pressure, and a revolutionary shipbuilding technology all converged, pushing Norsemen outward onto the open sea. The longship was their secret weapon, shallow enough to sail rivers, strong enough to cross oceans, fast enough to appear from nowhere and vanish before dawn. Building a longship was a community act. Every plank shaped by hand, every joint sealed with tar and animal hair. It was engineering as art. 3 groups of Norse people expanded in 3 directions: Danes west to England and France, Norwegians northwest to Iceland, Greenland, and America, Swedes east into Russia. Their navigational skills were extraordinary, using the stars, the sun, migrating birds, and even the color of the sea to find their way across featureless open water. Let's talk about the raids, because they were real and they were brutal. But they were also strategic, selective, and short-lived in the broader sweep of Viking history. Monasteries were the early targets, not because Vikings hated Christianity, but because monasteries had wealth, no army, and no walls. Paris was besieged twice. The Vikings sailed up the Seine, demanded silver, and mostly they got it. It was extortion at a continental scale. But here is the part often forgotten. The Vikings who raided in June were often the same Vikings who traded in September. Raiding was one strategy, settlement was another. By the 9th century, Vikings weren't just passing through, they were staying, farming, marrying locally, and building kingdoms. The Danelaw in England, Normandy in France, named after the Northmen, Dublin, founded by Norse settlers. These weren't raids, these were civilizations. Within a generation, Norse settlers intermarried, adopted local languages, converted to local faiths, and yet left an indelible mark on everything they touched. The Viking impact was not erasure, it was fusion. Everywhere they went, they became part of something new. Now here's the truth that changes everything. The Vikings were, above all, the greatest long-distance traders of the medieval world. Swedish Vikings, the Varangians, paddled east through Russia's rivers, establishing trade routes from Scandinavia to Byzantium and beyond. They traded furs, amber, and slaves for silk from China, spices from Persia, and silver from the Islamic world. A supply chain spanning 5,000 miles. Archaeologists have found Arabic durums buried in Swedish soil, Arabic words carved into Norse artifacts. The medieval world was far more connected than we imagine. Hedeby in Denmark, Birka in Sweden. These were cosmopolitan trading hubs buzzing with merchants from across the known world. and westward Iceland was discovered, then Greenland. Then, around 1000 AD, Leif Erikson stepped ashore in a land he called Vinland, North America. 5 centuries before Columbus. They built a camp, collected grapes and timber, and then, after conflicts with the indigenous people they called Scrawlings, they withdrew. History's first European contact with the Americas, and they walked away. The Norse global reach from Newfoundland to Persia, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, remains one of history's most astonishing geographic achievements. Inside Viking society, you'd find something that looks surprisingly modern. A legal system, a parliament, and rights that extended, remarkably, to women. The Thing, the Norse assembly, was one of the world's earliest democratic institutions. Free men gathered to settle disputes, make laws, and judge crimes. The Althing of Iceland, established in 930 AD, is considered the world's oldest surviving parliament. It still meets today, over 1,000 years later. Viking women could own property, initiate divorce, and reclaim their dowry. The keys of the household hung from their belt, a symbol of authority that was real, not decorative. Viking men cared deeply about appearance. Combs, razors, and tweezers are among the most common finds at Norse sites. They bathed weekly, far more than most medieval Europeans. They had skalds, court poets, who memorized and performed epic poems called sagas. These oral traditions preserved history, genealogy, and mythology for generations before a single word was written down. Norse society had 3 classes: Jarls at the top, Carls in the middle, and at the bottom, thralls, the enslaved. Slavery was real, common, and a dark truth the myths conveniently leave out. A thrall could be freed, and freedom, once granted, was legally binding. The Norse had a word for it, lisingi, a freed person. A new beginning. The Norse believed in a universe held up by an immense ash tree, Yggdrasil, connecting 9 worlds inhabited by gods, giants, elves, dwarves, and the dead. At the top sat Asgard, home of the gods. In the middle, Midgard, the world of humans. And below, in the roots of the tree, lay realms of ice, fire, and the dead. Odin, the Allfather, was not just a war god. He was the god of wisdom, poetry, magic, and death. He sacrificed his eye for knowledge. He hung himself on Yggdrasil for 9 days to learn the runes. Thor was beloved not for fighting monsters, but for protecting ordinary people, farmers, and the harvest. The hammer Mjolnir was worn as an amulet, a symbol of protection, not aggression. Valhalla was not a paradise for all the dead, only those chosen by the Valkyries, warrior maidens who selected the bravest fallen on the battlefield. The Valkyries rode across the sky in the battlefield, luminous, powerful, making choices that determined who would feast in Odin's hall and who would not. The other half went to Folkvanger, ruled by Freya. Most Vikings, dying peacefully, went to hell, not punishment, simply the quiet realm of the ordinary dead. Ship burials were the grandest send-offs, the deceased buried or burned aboard their vessel, surrounded by weapons, food, animals, and sometimes companions who chose to follow. No one wore horned helmets in battle. That image comes from 19th century theatrical costumes, not history. The one authentic Viking helmet ever found has no horns whatsoever. The berserkers were real, warriors who entered a trance-like fury before battle, but they were rare. Most Viking fighters were disciplined, organized, and fought in tight shield walls. The Norse gods were not distant or perfect. They aged. They made mistakes. They felt fear. Even Odin knew the world would end in Ragnarok, and he prepared anyway. There is something profoundly human in that. What ended the Viking Age? Not a single battle, not a single conquest. The Viking Age dissolved slowly across a century as Scandinavia converted to Christianity. Olaf Haraldsson of Norway forcibly Christianized his kingdom in the 11th century. The old gods didn't die easily. Many Norsemen quietly maintained the old faith behind closed doors. Christianity brought literacy, monasteries, and written culture, but also centralized power and a moral framework that reframed raiding as sin rather than strategy. The kingdoms of Scandinavia consolidated. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden emerged as unified states, and their kings channeled Viking energy into crusades and continental politics instead. The Battle of Hastings in 1066 marks the symbolic end, when Harold Hardrada fell in England, and William the Conqueror, himself a descendant of Norse settlers, took the English throne. In the end, the Vikings didn't disappear. They transformed. They became the Normans of France, the Rus of Russia, the Kings of England, the Varangian Guard of Byzantium. Dublin, Kiev, Normandy, Sicily, cities and regions shaped by Norse hands, now barely recognizable as Viking in origin. The transformation was so complete it became invisible. The longships were hauled ashore for the last time. The age of raids was over, but the age of influence, quiet, invisible, lasting, had only just begun.
The legacy of the Vikings is written in our language. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, named after Tyr, Odin, Thor, and Frigg. Their gods survive in every week of our lives. Words like berserk, ransack, knife, skull, window, all from Old Norse. They shape the very English language we speak without ever knowing it. DNA studies show that up to 6% of the British male population carries Scandinavian Y chromosomes. In the Orkney Islands, it's closer to 30%. The Vikings are still among us, in our blood. The Normans, descendants of the Norse, conquered England in 1066, Sicily in 1072, and established Crusader states in the Middle East, the most globally connected people of the medieval world. The concept of jury trials, representative assemblies, and local governance. Historians trace threads of these democratic ideals back to the Norse, Thing culture of 1,000 years ago. In 2000, a Norse settlement was confirmed at Lance O Meadows in Newfoundland. Physical proof that Leif Erikson's America was real. Not myth, not legend, archaeology. So who were the Vikings really? They were contradictions, brutal and beautiful, violent and visionary. They raided monasteries and composed poetry. They enslaved people and built parliaments. They were, in the end, deeply human. The next time you say Thursday, or sit on a jury, or watch the sun set over the North Atlantic, remember, somewhere in that world, a Norse ship once sailed and changed everything it touched.